Hello. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to talk about today. I haven't done this in a while. Let me look through maybe movies. I've seen a couple of movies. Let's be recent for once. Let's talk about Ready Player One. So I saw Ready Player One over the weekend. I saw it on Thursday night, I think, and it is. If you're not familiar with it, Ready Player One is a film directed by Steven Spielberg, and it is based on a novel by Ernest Cline, which I actually read last year, and I thought the book was quite fun. There's some problems with it. There's some problems that people have with it, but I thought it was very fun. I didn't mind the constant references, and I thought that the treatment of video game culture was very. It was very nerdy for sure, but I think it came from a warm and heartful and loving place. And it was not in any kind of way annoying for me because I was partly, I guess, maybe because I was familiar with the references. So with the level of familiarity that I had, it felt like it was more of just a loving ode to them as opposed to just a masturbatory indulgence for those who may not be familiar with the source material or the material that was being referenced. Um, but if any for me, and I think about any excuse to really let other people know more about the things that you love, whether it is by name dropping it in a book or in a movie. I think that is, while one may call it indulgent, I think it is quite sweet. I think it's a level of immortalization. It's trying to keep something in the pop sphere much longer than it already is, and I think it's kind of sweet actually. Anyway, so Ready Player One is the Steven Spielberg adaptation of this book, and I think that it is okay. I tried very much to like the film. I think that there are many things that are the film that is that goes well for the film in terms of its. I don't necessarily subscribe into a sense of good or bad in terms of how one would qualify what a movie is, because it's all very arbitrary. I think, and the more you learn about the history of film and the history of film criticism and the history of just the different movements of film, you realize like these things are kind of not very important per se. It's more about how they work within the traditions and all of that, and how that differentiates from one another. But I can talk about how much fun I had or whatever. I thought I wasn't having so much fun with this movie. I enjoyed a lot of the visual elements of it. I thought that the integration of the kind of video game cutscene-ish graphics that felt like I was watching something from Elder Scrolls or some World of Warcraft kind of thing. The visuals of the VR world I thought was quite. At first, it was kind of off-putting and bizarre because it reminded me of some kind of like uncanny valley-ish kind of thing, but I thought it was effective, and I thought it was a good representation of video game culture and the role-playing game elements of just video games, and I thought it was very well made in that level. But I found that the film's heart, what was driving the film in terms of its emotional thrust was the romance between. I don't remember their names. It was whatever, Ty Sheridan's character and the girl from Thoroughbreds. Artemis and the main character, right? So the narrative thrust of the emotional component comes from that relationship, I think, and the film leans heavily on that as the foreground of the narrative, as it's like directly being compared with that of Halliday's Mark Rylance's character and the wife of Alden Morrow, Simon Pegg's character. But I think so I felt that was the emotional thrust, and I felt like I never really bought into that romance. So I felt like I had a very difficult time kind of accepting the romance. The book has problems with this as well, but I think the film for me did not achieve a level of satisfaction in that element that would have brought me to more emotional engagement, I think. But I did enjoy the references. For those who haven't seen it, and this is about to be a big spoiler, I was fanboying so hard with the Shining sequence. I'm a big film fan, and I think it's so fucking cool that Steven Spielberg recreated scenes from The Shining, one of his friends, Stanley Kubrick's films. And if you're familiar with the history of their relationship with one another, as Kubrick wrote Artificial Intelligence AI. He wrote the story for that, and Steven Spielberg finished it after Kubrick died. And there's this very interesting relationship between those two people, and to see that that Steven Spielberg would show reverence to his friend and fellow filmmaker. I thought it was very heartwarming, and it was just very well done as well. When The Shining came, the thing is, like, if you read the book, you know that the book and the film are completely different in terms of the actual content of the challenges and the order of things. It's very it's more, it kind of just gets the skeletal structure of the book and does what it wants with it in a completely new way in the movie, though it is also co-written by Ernest Cline, the screenplay. But the Shining sequence was absolutely fantastic, I thought. And I think, you know, there's a lot of people who come to this and they have a sense in which they feel that that Ready Player One or the movie and everything is so self-congratulatory, very masturbatory. People are giving a lot of shit for referencing all these things on the pop culture. They're like, everyone's like rolling their eyes. But when you think of the movie, when you watch the movie, I guess when I watch most movies, it feels to a certain extent it is very disconnected from the time in which it was made. It's hard to really put one yourself into the cultural landscape of a film when you were watching it, right? So when you see this film in 20 years, people will not care so much about this masturbatory element of it. When you see this in 20 years, it will be more of a reflection of VR culture, be a reflection of what we consider important in our society, which is this tension between technology and personal lives and how to make that distinction, and the facts and everything being referenced, you know, they'll just be background. You know, this is the thing I was saying earlier. I think it's fascinating because what makes this special is that it's made by Steven Spielberg, and Steven Spielberg was the 80s. He's the epitome of the 80s, and in this film he is, in some sense, in every sense of the word, I think, he is immortalizing 80s culture in a way that would transcend its time. When this movie is seen 20 years from now, no one's going to complain that they're name dropping movies. They'll be fascinated by the things being name dropped. They will read it up. They will read more about it. They will. The fact that it's, you know, the book also does this the book does this in a way of video game culture, and for people, a lot of people are giving a shit about the book. But the thing is, if you read the book with an open mind and you're very curious about video game culture and 80s and the culture in general, pop culture. I'm not sure if this is how anyone else did it, but when I was reading it, I was actively looking up the games, and I was learning more about the histories of them. I was learning more about the different films and TV shows. I was actively engaging with the book's references to pop culture by educating myself more, and I think that was the purpose of the book. The purpose was to give more attention to these things, because if they don't get not too much attention, they'll fall into the wayside and be forgotten by history, and this is a way to immortalize it in that sense. And where the book and the film coincide is in a beautiful recreation. I love it how they had adventure in the film, because that is such an important part of the book and the important part of the heart of video game culture in general, and how this, you know, it's about this sense of creating something and wanting to be acknowledged or remembered, and it's a very human idea that you get from Warren Robinett, and the fact of the very first Easter egg. I think it's a very important part of the book that was translated to the film, although it doesn't feel as relevant to the main structural identity of the film. But it was still nice to have it up there, to have people just the fact that people in a theater, millions of people were sitting in a theater watching adventure, being just the fact that they were learning about adventure, or they were aware of adventure's existence and of Warren Robinett's creation. I think that is more than worth more than worth any shit that can be given to the film, because it's in that sense, it is just, it's reverence, it's love, and I think that's what most films ought to do, and this is very fascinating. I think I wasn't super into the movie, but I was so reverent for it, and I respected it, and I had a blast in my own way. So that's what Ready Player One was, and I recommend that you see it for sure.